Anne, am y gwahoddiad. Mae'n fraint bod yma heddiw. It's a great privilege to be here in what we believe was the former Archdeacon's home, which is very grand. I think thankfully Archdeacons don't get such grand homes in Wales now. We treat them just as ordinary people. But it's fascinating to think what the atmosphere would have been here in that year, 1405, and getting together and signing this treaty to divide England and Wales into three parts, and the anticipation that there must have been, and really important to remember, but I'll leave that to the experts to talk about. So I think I'll hand over you two.
Martin said I'd have up to 5 minutes on the revolts of Glyndŵr, but I don't know whether I want to sort of keep you out in the cold. But yes, if there is time, of course we are celebrating a millennium and a half of Bangor's history this year. It's a long stretch of time, and a time where Bangor has been through momentous changes. But of course, despite the ravages of time, in the words of that old song, "Dan ni yma o hyd i'r Bangor" is still standing. But if we go back to the period where the tripartite indenture was agreed in Bangor, of course, it's a period of deepening crisis, but also a time of visionary leadership and hopes for a better world. As well. Of course, in the century leading up to 1405, Wales had been through the Edwardian conquest, famine, plague, and then of course it would have been unsurprising had Wales not suffered the revolts during this period. It's a period of peasants' revolts throughout Europe in this period. However, the decision to proclaim Owain Owain Glyndŵr, as he came to be known as the Prince of Wales, at the inception of the revolts in September 1400, implied also a national redemptive dimension as well. And it's that air of mystery that surrounds him that also gives the revolts this kind of imaginative appeal today. Of course, as many of you will know, it arose probably out of a local dispute, but like a brush fire, quickly became a national revolt and igniting underlying tensions, and with it the destructive forces. Owain, of course, was aided by political rivalries in England, and by 1404 he's certainly fishing in international waters as well. Owain also is a man who was marked by quasi-messianic pretensions as well, and this is certainly reflected in the tripartite indenture, which, as you were saying, goes as far as dismembering the English realm, because England, including Wales, into three. Owain receiving a much enlarged Wales, a Wales that would have encompassed places such as Liverpool, Bolton, Manchester, all the way up to the source of the Mersey, and then of course into the march into Shropshire, Herefordshire, Gloucestershire, and so on. Was this, this in a way marks the high point of both Glyndŵr's power and also his ambitions. In 1406, this would be followed up by two letters sent from Pennal to King Charles of France, proposing, on the one hand, to transfer the loyalty of the Welsh Church to the papacy in Avignon, and then also the establishment of two universities in Wales, one in the north and one in the south. And I'd like to think that had it got so far in terms of sort of deciding where the university would have been, probably in the north, in Bangor, because of the link to the cathedral here. However, the revolt in the end, of course, was not a success. But that it lasted so long, however, tells us something both about Glyndŵr's popularity and also about his vision as well. Most contemporary revolts would last a year at most. If we look at sort of European history, peasants' revolts, the type of revolts that were sparked by, discontent, by the ravages of plague, and so on, they don't last that long. But Glyndŵr's revolt lasts for a decade, and then also his adherents are still at large for, in the case of his son, he's at large for 20 years. It tells us something about, in a way, what motivated, what fired the revolt. And I'd like to, in a way, end by applauding the Civic Council for not so much recognising Glyndŵr the person. Yes, there is much to, Glyndŵr is a very sort of appealing character, but statues, of course, don't make for good historical storytelling. What gives us access to Glyndŵr the man and the ideas that fired his revolt are the surviving texts. And here we have a record that, of course, in Bangor, one of the most visionary, one of the most, in many ways, far-fetched documents related to Glyndŵr. Was the Tripartite Indenture practical? Probably not, but it says something about his vision and where he saw the potential of his revolt going. So on that note, and also with the car beeping outside, I think that's my cue. Thank you very much for the invitation, and I hope that having this plaque here right in the centre of Bangor, will in a way sort of point people to sort of look again at the evidence that we have. There's plenty of evidence for Glyndŵr. He's not just a man of mystery, not just some kind of quasi mythical national hero, but he was a man of his time, a statesman, yes, a warrior, but also a statesman with links across the British Isles and on the continent as well. And the Tripartite Indenture takes it in a way right to, in a way, Glyndŵr's thought process. Diolch yn fawr iawn i chi. Ie, yn feddwio rhaid bod
Iawn, mae'r amser wedi... Mae symud yma jyst i chi weld. Gobeithio. Dyma ni.